Hello and welcome to Django Ninja CRUD tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll take you through the basic process of creating, returning, updating and deleting data with Django Ninja. Just before you undertake this tutorial, it's worth saying this, that if you are fairly familiar with creating these type of applications, just head over to Django Ninja documentation, because you can read through this in around about 15 minutes and get the general idea of what it is that you need to do in order to perform simple operations, create, return, update and delete with Django Ninja. Having said that, if you are someone kind of new to development, you're not too sure about how to work with Django, let alone Django Ninja, then I'm just going to take you through the basic steps of creating, returning, updating and deleting data with Django Ninja. So if you're still interested, let me just tell you what we're going to be doing here. So we're going to go through, I think, 8 examples here. We're going to set up the application and then we'll go through just creating a very basic endpoint for create. So we're going to create some categories and products and then return. So we go through the process of returning single or multiple items. And then just kind of the trivial, really, at this point, setting up an update endpoint and a deletion endpoint so we can update and delete data in our database. And then we'll move on to some other examples. So for example, handling form data as parameters, because typically you probably want to, on the front end, create a form and send that data across to the back end. So we need to know how to handle that. And then we go through file uploads as well, because no doubt someone will ask me if I forget to do that. So you will find a link in the video description, which will take you to this project download. So go ahead and download it, get it started with Visual Studio Code or your default preferred video, your default editor, and then we can start going. So let's go ahead and start off by creating a virtual environment for this. So I'm in Mac, you can run this on Windows. Okay. Right, so we've got the virtual environment on the Mac. Then we'll type in source bin and then activate. If you're not too sure how to do this, there is a video not too long ago from this video. It takes you through the process with Windows and Mac setting up virtual environment. So with that said, let's go over to the requirements. You can see that we're going to run Django. This project has or integrates Django, MPTT, Pillow and PyTest. So we'll just go and run that. So pip install. There we go. Seems like a good idea in that we're going to be using Django Ninja to install Django Ninja. If you go over the basic tutorial here, it'll actually take you through or give you the command here that you're going to need. That's pip install Django Ninja. So let's go back, start that up, and then we'll just update for no particular reason. We'll just update our requirements. Okay, so now we've installed Ninja, where is it? Django Ninja. There we go. If you are watching this tutorial, well beyond when it was created, just make a note of the version of Django Ninja that I'm using here, because this might be slightly outdated. If this tutorial is outdated, let me know and I'll remake it with the latest version. This is our database setup for this tutorial. Simply a case of having a product table. There's a foreign key over to category. And then we have a media table, and that's connected via a foreign key over to product. So that's the table setup here. You will find, however, that the fields are slightly different from what's advertised here. So if you go into the inventory models, you'll find that there's slightly different field setup. So as and when we do start to create endpoints to update and delete data, etc., we just need to make a note of what fields are actually available. So now we've familiarized ourselves with the project, let's get started. So let's go ahead and create a new folder here, D Ninja. So this is where we're going to host all the Ninja files. And inside of here, I like to make a file, and you can call it whatever you like. I'm calling mine API.py. That's going to hold all kind of the Ninja kind of logic, if you like, or the endpoints. And then we're going to create a new file here for the URLs to set up a set of URLs specifically for this project. And then I'll go ahead and create a new file called schema. So here we're going to define all the schemas. So to allow the data to be validated and checked against the database. So we're going to create some schemas. So let's just get this project started to begin with, and then we'll start going through CRUD. So let's go into URLs. You can see that I've already set up a new path for Ninja. So path and then Ninja slash. So anything Ninja related is going to be accessed through Ninja slash. And you can see here that I've connected this to ecommerce.ninja URLs. So that just points it towards Ninja URLs. So here I'm just extending this list, but through this file here. So going into my URLs, I'm just going to need to set this up, a basic kind of setup here. So from Django .urls, let's import path. Then from ecommerce .ninja, that's the one, .api. Let's import API. So we're going to need all the information from API eventually, and that's going to help us kind of build the connection between our endpoint and our API endpoints inside of the API file. So just bring that in for now, and then we'll say URL patterns equals, oh, does it for me, path, and then it's going to be blank. So basically to access any of the Django Ninja paths, it's just going to be utilizing the default kind of Ninja here, and then whatever we place here. So this can be like the home, if you like. So API .urls. Okay, so that makes sense in a minute. So we've set up that. So that just is a way of extending the URLs from the main URLs file. So we can add some more URLs, and Django Ninja is going to set this all up for us automatically. It's a beautiful program in that respect. So now we have that done. Let's just close that. We don't need that anymore. Let's go into the API here. Okay, so first up then, let's just quickly do a hello world if you're not too familiar with this. So first up then, we're going to be using Django Ninja, believe it or not. So we're going to say API equals Ninja API. So that's then going to give us access to all the Ninja tools, etc. So we're going to extend from the Ninja API class. So let's go ahead now and create an endpoint. So we're going to say API dot, and then let's do get. So here we're just going to create an endpoint, just slash, and that's going to be the home, or let's do home. Let's do slash home. And then we can go ahead and now create a function after this declarator here. So add, or we can say just home, if you like. So we're just going to take in request, and then we're going to return, well, we're just going to return, let's just return hello world. So what's happening here then, we created an endpoint. If you're familiar to endpoints and APIs, that will make sense, but if not, it'll probably make sense in a second. So once we've got here, you can see that when we start up Django Ninja, we've got this default path of Ninja slash. So anything else that we add after the slash is then going to be registered as a URL that we can access. So what we're saying here is that if we want to get this data here, in this case, we can access it through Ninja slash home. So that's an endpoint. So that endpoint, that URL, can be sent to Django, and then Ninja will pick up that endpoint and then match it to one of these functions here, in this case, this function here, and then run this function. So let's just go back into Safari or whatever you're using, and let's just kind of access this endpoint. So we're going to need to turn on the server. Okay. So our endpoint then is 127.0.0.1 :8000 slash, and then we need to type in Ninja and then slash and then home. So you can see what's happened. I've used that endpoint now to then access the data. In this case, it just says hello world. The great thing about Django Ninja also is that it has built-in documentation, or it has the tools all built in. So there's nothing extra we need to do to start to document our API. So I've turned the server on here. I just need to navigate to my endpoint Ninja again and type in docs. And that will then take me to the documentation. You can see here we've created an endpoint. We can go ahead and try it out. And that will then allow us to execute. And you can see that what it returns and gives us some additional information. So now we've gone through a very simple workflow. Let's now have a look at create. So creating new data with Django Ninja. So it's the ability of taking data from a front end that's been passed over to Django Ninja and then inserting that data into the database. So at this point, we need to first think about, before we create data, adding data into a database, we need to create a schema. So if you like, this is basically describing what data will be passed in to our database. So this is going to be an input schema, for example. So let's say from Ninja, let's import schema. There's a few different ways of building a schema. So we'll go through both of them in this tutorial. So let's create a new class. Let's call this category. So we're going to insert data into the category table. So let's say category in, and this is going to be a schema. So now we just need to define the data that we want to insert into a database. So it's going to be name, and that's going to be a string. And then we also want to include a slug, and that needs to be a slug. Well, that's going to be string. Good point. So that needs to be a string. So there we have it, a simple input schema ready for us to utilize. So this is going to provide validation. It's going to ensure that the data that you're sending from the front end matches what's expected in the back end in terms of the data that needs to be inserted and the data types. So let's go and create a new API endpoint now for post. So we're not getting data now, we're posting data to the database. So we're going to use post. And now we're going to say where we want to send that data. So inventory/category. So that's where we're going to send the data. That's going to be our endpoint to send that data. If someone does go and utilize that endpoint, we need some sort of action. So we're going to say post category, and then we're going to take in the request and then with data, and that data is going to refer to our schema, which is going to be the category. I can't remember what it's called it now, schema. So let's just double check that. So schema is called category in, category in. So we're going to need to import that in here so we can use it. That's why it's underlined there. So from e-commerce .inventory.models, where am I going? I don't need that. From schema, I don't need the model. I need the schema. From .schema, import is called category in. I do need the schema because I do need the database. So from e-commerce, because I'm going to need to actually insert it into a database. So I'm going to need reference to the database, inventory.models. Let's import category. That's where I want to save the data, right? So this function, let's just finish this off. So what's going to happen here then is someone will be using this endpoint. They need to make sure that the data that they send to this endpoint matches our schema that we've referenced here, name and slug. And then after that, we then need to insert it into the database. So let's say QS equals category dot, and this is just a Django command. So create some data. So we'll just grab all that data, lowercase data, and then we'll go ahead and just add it into the database. Okay, so then we go ahead and return just some ID. Yeah, let's just return ID QS.name, for example. So we're just going to return the category name that we created. Okay, so you can see the error here. I don't know why I used a colon there. Right, so that's pretty much what we need then for a create here with Django Ninja. So let's just give this a go. So go ahead and turn the server on, run server. Let's go back into our documentation here. Let's just go to the root of our documentation again. So we have one endpoint. This is going to be for posting a category. So let's just give this a go. So example value, so it knows that it's expecting 2 strings. So let's just try this out. So we're going to name string, a slug string. So we'll just execute that, go down here, and you can see that it looks like we've got an error. So category has no attribute object. Right, so let's go back up here. So we've got name slug. We've got a problem. Q has category.object.create. Oh, okay, so we've missed the S of object. Now, obviously, I did this on purpose so that we could see the errors here and start to debug, because that's where we're going to learn the most information, right? So it has no attribute object, so it's directing me directly to where I need to go, and that should be objects. So if I change that and restart, and I can just fire this off again, I can execute it again, and this time, well, we seem to have an even bigger problem. A unique constraint failed. Inventory category.slug. Okay, I think what's happened now is that we've tried to add more information or information that already exists. So therefore, we can't now add the information again. So let's just have a look at this. Okay, so I made a little bit of an error there. I haven't actually created a database yet. This was just something that was just there. So the error that I'm receiving is because there is a database already made, and I just wanted to take you through that process very quickly. So I've just removed the inventory migrations. You won't have that in there in your example that you've downloaded. Apologies about that. So I'm just going to close that server. Just going to clear that. So what I have here in demo is some fixtures. It's just the admin fixture, so you don't have to create a new admin. So you can just go ahead and run this. So Python 3 manage.py, and then demo. Inside your management commands here, you've got demo fixtures command. So that's just going to run make migrations, migrate, and load that data. So I'm just going to run demo fixtures, and it's going to run this command, the second command, and then load the fixtures there. So I now have an admin area. So now I've got a fresh new database. Let's just go back again. We're going to try this one more time. So we're just going to execute this one more time. And this time it will work, absolutely no problems at all. So it looks like everything is okay. Good. But is it? So this is another problem you might receive. Type error load failed, because clearly here I don't actually have the server on. So that's potentially another issue that you're going to have. Obviously a simple resolve here, run server. So now the server is turned on. We have a clean database. So let's just try this one more time. Execute. And there we go. So we receive a 200 response. We return what we're expecting. And that was just the ID. I think it was the ID. Yeah, so the name, sorry, I don't know why I said ID here. It should be the name, shouldn't it? So that's the name of the category that we've just inserted. And we get the 200 code and everything is okay. So now we've actually inserted it into the database. If you're interested in seeing the data, then just head over to your admin area. So as long as you've got the server on, go to admin. Now you should have, if you've loaded the fixtures in, it should be admin and password. That's the username and password. And then you can now see if you go into categories, we have a new category, string, string. So we'll just go through a second example of create. There isn't really too much to it in basic terms. We'll just close that server down. Clear that. So back into e-commerce then, Ninja API. Let's just go for a second example here. So we're going to add some data into the product table. So we're going to need to add a new product now. So this is going to be at API.post again. So we're going to post some data. Again, we're going to need some sort of endpoint, inventory/product, and then we're going to need a new function. So let's just call this post product. And it's a similar process, request, and then data. So we're going to say product schema. So product schema. That's what we're going to create in a second. So let's just pass there and create our product schema. So similar to what we did previously, we're going to need to know what data we want to insert into our database. So go into inventory models. Down here we can see the product. So we're going to need a web ID, slug, name, description, category. So notice here we've got a foreign key. So we're going to need to find potentially this product connected to a category. So we need to do that. Now this is a foreign key in the product table. So we can just insert a number. Now notice here there is a set default that's been defined. So if, for example, the category is deleted in the category table, it's going to set the default to category number 1 in the product table. Right, so let's go back into our schema. So we're going to create the schema in a slightly different way. So let's go down here. So this time we're going to utilize model schema. And this is basically just a way of giving us a little bit more control over our schema. So model schema, and we're going to call this class, and I'm going to call this product schema, or schema. And then we're taking model schema here. So this time, slightly different. We're going to set the class config, and then we're going to say model. So we're going to just define what model we want to use, so equals product. And then we're going to define our model fields. So it's a different way of working with your tables that provides a little bit more flexibility than creating a schema like this. But ultimately what this creates is a schema such as this. It's just that we're working in a slightly different way. So we're going to name, and then we're going to add a web ID, and these are the fields on the table, of course, and then a category. So those are kind of the 3 fields that we're going to pass in when we create a new product in this case. So yours might be slightly different, of course. Right, so now we've got that on the go. We now know what we want to insert in, validate. So the user must send to our API endpoint name, web ID, and category. That's what it's expecting. This is obviously going to be converted into something like this, or behind the scenes, so it knows what data type it's expecting within these categories. I think category is going to be an integer potentially. So let's go back into our endpoint. So we now have our product schema. So let's just bring that in. And now we can utilize it. So we want to create now the query. So let's go ahead and do that. So this time it's going to be product dot objects with an S dot create. And then this time we're going to take all the data, so same process again, data. So we just grab all that data, that gets then passed into the product table. Now the product table needs to be imported in. So we can access the product table, and there we go. So that should be it. So let's just define a return. So let's just say this time name equals QS dot name. Give that a go. So let's just change that to name. So that should allow us now to enter data into our product table. So notice we do include the foreign key because that's going to be a dependency there in order for us to actually build a product, because there's a foreign key between the product schema and product and category in our table, in our database. So let's go back to our schema here. Oh, sorry, our documentation. Make sure we turn the server on. Seems like a good idea. Okay, so now we have 2 endpoints. Wonderful. So let's go ahead and post a product. So we're just going to post this product here, and we're going to try this out. So we're just going to change this data, so you can change it. So I'm just going to call this string 1. Now it needs to be associated to a category, and of course category, there's only one category, so that's going to be category ID 1. Now notice here that it says category ID. It's picked up as category ID. If I execute this, it's going to tell me that there's an error because there's no such thing as category ID here. Right, so let's just go back here and I'll just show you that. So if I go back in my schema, notice it's called category. Okay, so that's the model field. If I go into my inventory models, into the product here, it's going to say, where is it, category. So that's what the field that I'm trying to refer to here, but it changes it to category ID. So I'm going to need to change that to category and then execute again. And this time you can see we return the name and everything's okay. So we just need to be careful about that if it does make any changes to any of your fields. If you were using this, of course, if you're making your application, you're going to define this. This is just the documentation. And saying that, let's just go back here. So if you're not using the documentation, there are other ways, obviously, to test this. One way is using, for example, Postman, which is a software where you can run it and test sets of APIs endpoints or test API endpoints. So here I've got Thunder Client. So if you go into the extensions, type in Thunder Client and install it. So I've gone ahead and installed this. It's just a kind of a nice endpoint, or a nice tool to kind of test endpoints. So let's create, I think maybe I've got one set up. So this is going to, nope, category form. So let's create a new request. So I just need the endpoint. So this is where the documentation comes in handy, right? So Ninja inventory product. So that's my endpoint. Now, if you go down here, it actually tells you, we can just copy from there. So let's add a new product. So let's go back here. So new request, we are going to post some data. Okay, so let's go into the header. See what we've got here. Oh, that's where it gets tricky. Let me just drop that down. Where are we? Sorry, body. Okay, so in the body here, we can add some text. So what do we need to enter? Well, we're kind of given the information here. We could utilize this, for example. So let's just add in some data. So we need to call a string, say 2. There we go. And then it needs to be category 1. So just give that a go. And you can see that status is 200, okay, and response is the name string 2. So we should have now 2 items in our database. So if I just refresh on products, we now have 2 items in our database. Okay, right, let's just get rid of this. So that was just another tool that you could utilize, have a little play around with. Right, so that's pretty much how to create some data here in Django Ninja with Django. So some simple examples there of how to create data using Post, Django Ninja, insert it into our database, test it with Thunder Client, and then also looking at the documentation, utilizing the documentation. So next up is return. So returning data. So as we go on, you're going to see how much easier this is. We've already covered really the bulk of the basics of getting CRUD in basic terms working. So we've got our schema, we've got our URLs that are automatically generated from our endpoints. Notice how that is kind of generated automatically for us. We've got our schema, the idea of building a schema or maybe utilizing a different approach to creating a schema gives us a little bit more control, the model schema. So we now know that. So to return data, we're now not going to post data, we're getting data. That's right, the crucial thing at this point. It's just a different approach at this point, but we are going to need to get data. We are going to need to know what data to return. So we're going to need to build a schema potentially for input and potentially another schema to define what should be outputted or returned back to the user based upon what's requested from the front end. So based upon the user's request. So let's go back into our API. Let's just move this across a bit, zoom in a bit, out even. Okay, so let's create a new API endpoint, API dot, and this time get. So we're going to get data this time. We're not posting data. We're going to use get to get data from a database. So we need to define some endpoints, of course, again, like we did previously. So this time it's inventory slash category slash all. So the idea here is that we're going to need to grab all the categories. Maybe we want to make some sort of maybe we want to make some sort of drop-down list. So we're going to need all the categories so that users can select from them. And then this time we would define a response. So let's use list and then category schema. Okay. So if I can just get rid of that over there so we can see the whole thing. There we go. So the whole point here using list is that we want to output, in this case, a list of items. We need to output multiple items. So we return the data, well, we're going to return the data from the database, and it will then automatically get evaluated against our schema and then converted into a JSON list because we're using list. So let's go ahead and bring in list. So we need to, from, I think it's typing, import list. Okay, so that's what's happening there. So category schema, that doesn't exist yet. So let's go ahead and make a category schema. Well, actually, in fact, we can probably use the same schema because we want the same output. So let's use a category. Now it's not category in. So let's just call this now category. Let's just call this category schema for the sake of this. So we'll just update this. So we're going to use the same schema for both in and out. So let's just bring in category schema, and then we'll go into the schema here. We'll just call this category schema now. So the point is here that we're just defining what we want to return. It just happens that we just want to return the name maybe in the slug. Of course, you may want to make another schema if you want to change the output, but that's just the general case. I think here we want to just output the name and maybe the URL. Right, so with that in place, category schema. I think this is where I'm going wrong, isn't it? So let's just make sure I've named this correctly. There we go. Okay, so category schema. So let's now build a function. Basically what we need to do here is to grab all the items based upon the request. So we're going to call this get category and then get a category list or get all categories. So we're taking request and then we'll go ahead and just run our query. And that's just going to be category. So we've already brought in category, the model, objects, and then .all. There we go. So that's basically just going to grab all the objects. It's going to be converted into a JSON list. We utilize list here. And then what we're going to grab is based upon what's defined here in our schema, the name and the slug. That's going to be returned. Sorry. So we're going to say return and then just QS. Oh, what's going on here? QS. And there we go. So that should return. So let's go over to, well, let's just make sure the server's turned on. Yep. And let's just go back over to our endpoints here. Wherever we are. No, here we are. So let's just go ahead, go back to the default page or the home page. Now we have a get. So let's go ahead and test this out. So if my memory serves me right, we should have a few categories already in the database. So let's try this out and we're going to execute. And then what gets returned is, I think there's just one item in the database. So let's just double check that. So let's just go ahead and just add a new one. Let's call this cat2. Not that I need to, but just to show that it's working. Press save. And then let's go back into Ninja here. So we're just going to run this again. This time we should return 2 items. We don't. Okay, so what are we doing here? Get. So we're getting all products. All categories, sorry. Oh, sorry, here. This is the response right here. So we can see here that we are grabbing both of those categories now. So as a second example, we'll just show you how you can kind of pass parameters into your endpoint. So API .get. So this time what we want to do is we want to grab all of the products based upon a particular category. So let's, for example, create an endpoint. So we're going to say inventory slash products slash category. So that's our endpoint, but this time we want to pass in and capture the category slug. So category slug here. So that's going to be passed in and then captured as part of the URL. So we're going to capture that in the URL and then utilize it to run a query. So with that done, we need to define the response. So we're going to set the response equals, and then we're going to return a list again. A list, and that's going to be the product schema. Okay, so it's something wrong here. I can't quite work it out. So I don't think we need that there. So put that on the end. Okay. So you can see the whole line. Right, so with that in place, let's go ahead and now create our new function. So get products by category, we'll call it that, taking the request as per normal, and then we'll just run another query. So query equals, and this time we're going to say product.objects, and this time we're going to run a simple filter, and then we can say category. Now the category inside the products table is a foreign key to the category table, so we can say category __. So traverse the table, so we're going from the category table over to the, so from the product table to now the category table, and inside of here we're going to grab or define the slug or identify the slug. So the slug should equal whatever the user's typed in here. So the idea is that in this section here, in the URL that gets done in the request, we're going to pass in the category slug, and then we're going to capture that category slug, and we're going to use it against this query so we can grab all the products that are related to this category slug. So we're taking the category slug, run that query, and then we're just going to return QS. And there we go, the results. Now then, category slug here. So what's going on here? Category slug. So we're just missing category slug here. We need to pass it into our function to make it available within our function, of course, thinking about scope. So it's going to be a string. We're expecting a string. There we go. So just double check that. I think we've only got one product associated with category. So we've got cat2 doesn't have a, oh no, sorry. We've got two products. They're both, oh, we've got one product here, string not associated to anything. So let's associate that to cat2. So, oh, slug, let's give it a slug. Let's call this cat2 web ID. Okay, so we've got, what I'm doing, cat2, product 2. Sorry, product 2. So let's call this product 2, and that's associated to category 2. So slug is going to be product 2. All right, so product 2 is connected to category 2. Category 2 being called cat2. So what we're going to do, we're going to run a query. Or we're going to run a request to grab all of the products from category 2. That's going to return one item. So let's go back into our endpoint here, and we're just going to refresh. Or we're going to go to the home page of our docs, sorry. So now we can see a new get endpoint here. All right, so let's just give this a go. Let's try this out. So what we're going to need to do here is just pass in the category slug, this component here. What was it? cat2, wasn't it? So let's give this a go, and you can see that we return one item, product 2, web ID, category 2. So I've just made another product, so there's two products now associated with category 2. So I give that a go again. You can now see I've got two products, just to check to see if it's working properly. So let's just try this out in our Thunder client. So new request, get, and then we want to get this endpoint. So I've just copied this endpoint. Okay, so let's go into our body, and then we've got some content here. Now we can just copy what we've got here. It takes a little bit of time. So, oh no, we don't need to do it. Apologies. So we don't need to pass anything. Sorry. We're getting data. So we're just getting data. So we're passing cat2. So let's send that off. And then that should return some useful information. So if I breeze this across again, you can see that that's what we're returning right here. Apologies for the complication there. So you can see that we are returning a response that we're expecting. So that's another example there of getting data from the database. So at this point, it gets a little bit trivial. Now we just need to update. So really, this is just a case of asking ourselves, how do we update using Django? Again, we just use the same process again, using our schemas, using our endpoints, creating an endpoint to allow user to send an update. And then, like I said, we just need to run a Django update query to update the data. So this time, what we're going to do is create an endpoint here. API dot, this time it's going to be put. Okay, so we want to make an update, so we're using put. And then let's make an endpoint, inventory slash, and then category slash, and then we need to define what category we want to update. So let's get the category, or define the category ID. There we go. Right, so next up then, let's create a function. Update category request, and then we can then basically define what we need to pass in, the category ID from the slug here, from the URL that's been requested. And then we need to say category ID is going to be an integer. And then in addition to that, we are then also going to need to identify the category schema, because that's what we want to update, right? So let's just call this, payload category schema. Okay, so that's basically defining and validating the data again. This is the data that we're expecting and so on. So now we've defined that, let's go and grab, so category equals. So we're going to get, first of all, the data, category equals get. We're going to use the old get object or 404, and then category. So that's going to get a single item. So I'm going to use that. What am I doing? So get object or 404 category. My brain is catching up. ID equals category ID. So what we're doing here then, we're running a simple query, a get object or 404. So we're going to return one item. If it doesn't return, then it's going to send across a 404 if it doesn't exist. So we're going to go into the category table and then look for the category with the ID of whatever ID that we pass in. Okay, so we are going to need to bring in the get object. So that is from Django shortcuts, Django.shortcuts. Let's import get object of 404. So that's a list. Get object. Okay, so we're bringing that in so we can utilize that. Like I said, have a look at the Django documentation if you're not too sure, but essentially that is just a running query. It's going to grab one item from this model, this table, where ID equals ID. Right, so now we grabbed that, we now need to do something. So that's obviously, we now need to update, of course. So let's say for attribute and value in payload. Items. So what we're doing here then, essentially we're going to grab the data from the database and we're putting, we're creating a nested dictionary, aren't we? So essentially each item that's been, for each attribute that's been extracted from the table, we're creating, well, I'll just kind of show you what we're doing here. So essentially we're creating, I think, off the top of my head, a dictionary, but inside it's going to be like name, whatever the name is. And then we're going to grab the second item. So essentially, this is what we're doing with this dict function here. We're kind of separating out the data like this. So what's it, slug, and whatever the slug is. So essentially, that's what we're kind of creating here. And then what we're doing is we're saying we'll grab each item individually. So what's going to happen is the name, or the value, sorry, the attribute, the name is going to go into attribute here, and the value is then going to be passed into here. And then we're just going to loop through this. So we're just grabbing these attributes that from the data that gets returned. Attribute, in this case, it'd be name from category, and then value will be whatever the value is. So for that, then we're going to loop around this. So we're going to say if there is a value, I think that's important. If there is a value, we're going to set attribute and then category. So we're referring now to the category item that we've selected from the database. And then what we want to say is set the attribute and value. So basically, we're just updating the attribute and value from the entry that we found. Remember, we're grabbing one item from the database there, and we're grabbing the data and formatting it so that we can iterate over the data, attribute and value. And then we check that if there is a value, because maybe we've not grabbed anything from the, well, we're kind of capturing it here, if we've not grabbed anything from the database. So if there is a value, then we're going to set it. And then what we need to do then, or update it. And then what we're going to do then is say category. So we're going to take our category instance that we've updated, and we can then just save it. Hopefully that makes sense. Apologies if I over-egged it there. So then we can return, for example, success true. How about that? Okay, so that's updating data, individual data in the database. So let's just give this a go. Right, so going over to our data then, let's go into the category. Let's just have a look at this. So this is our first category. And now up here it tells me it's category ID 1. So we're going to change the name in the slug of category ID 1. That's what we're going to do. So let's go back into here, into our documentation. We'll use this for now. So we now have a put. Okay, so let's go over here. So we're going to say category ID. Oh, we'll try this out. So try this out. So category ID is going to be 1. And then we want to update it. So we say, we're going to say this cat 1. And then the name's going to be cat 1. So we're going to update it to cat 1. And then execute that. And then we got success true return, so it must have been done. Go into our database, we refresh, and you can see that we've updated the category. So let's move on to the last part here at least, which is delete. There are some other examples that you can stay on for. Handling form data as parameters, file upload, multiple file uploads. So we'll have a look at that if you want to do that. But let's have a look at a basic example of delete. Really, really simple at this point, hopefully. API dot and then delete. So this time we're going to delete, and then we're going to have an endpoint category, and then just the category ID. So let's go for cat. I'm just going to say cat ID this time. Right, so there we go. So that's our endpoint for deletion. So def delete delete category. So we're just going to, of course, delete cat request. We're going to need the cat ID, pass that in as an integer. Yep. And then we are then going to grab category equals get object 404. And then we're going to get the category table, and then ID equals cat ID. So we're going to grab the instance first. From the database. Now we can just say here delete. We could do that. That will then delete that item. We'll just add a new line here. So we say category dot delete. There we go. So that deletes. So we just then return. What do we want to return? So let's turn a dictionary success true. Yeah, there we go. So hopefully that would delete a category. So let's flick over here. So we're going to delete category, well, 2. We're going to delete category 2. That's the plan, because category 1 is the default in the database. Remember, it's going to, if we delete a category, if you have a look at the model fields, we're using use default. So it's going to default to category 1. So let's go back here. I'll show you that in a second. So delete, here we go. So we just need to try this out. Let's go for category 2. Let's execute it. Looks like it's okay. Let's go back in here, refresh our category. So we've now only got one category. Good. So what I meant earlier, in the inventory models, notice that I've set models.setDefault. So if we do delete a associated category object, then instead of deleting the product as well, what it's going to do is going to set any product related, in this case, to category 2 to category 1. That's the setup we've got here in this model. So if I go back into my products, go to product 2, which was part of category 1 to begin with, it's now associated to category 1. Okay, short and simple. That's how you can then go ahead and delete an item from your database using simple CRUD methods with Django Ninja. So that's taken us through the CRUD examples. Thank you very much for listening. If you're going now, if you'd like to hang on, we're just going to go through some other examples here. So handling form data as parameters, file upload, multiple file uploads. So 6N, let's have a look at handle form data as params. So the likelihood is that you have created a front end that has a form of some sort. Users enter data into that form. You press the button, they send that data then to the back end, it gets processed. So when you make a post request, you have to encode the data that forms the body of the request in some way. So HTML forms provide 3 methods of encoding, and that can be the application/xww form URL encoded, multi-part form data, text plain. So there's kind of 3 different methods here of encoding. Now we want to basically be able to grab that data that's been sent via the form and process it as we've done so far. So let's just go over an example of that. So here we're going to just pretend we're going to create an API.post endpoint. This is going to be for the inventory category form. So let's imagine we've created a front end. It has the capabilities of users typing into a form a new category that they want to build, right? So that's a scenario here. Unlikely, but that's a scenario. So with that in place, let's go ahead and create a new function. We're going to call this post category form. We're going to take in the request again, and then we're going to say form, and this time we're going to specify the schema again. So it's going to be the category schema, which I think we've got, haven't we? Category schema. I'm doing it in the wrong place. That's why. Okay, let's do it in the right place. Okay, right, out of models, want to go in the API, of course. Apologies. Right, so there we go. We've got a category schema right there. That should, yep. Okay, so it says category schema, and then we're going to say form. Form, we're going to bring in form, and then ... Okay, so this is going to allow us to essentially capture items from a form, or it's going to allow us to parse and validate request post data, right? So what we're going to need to bring in, we need to import from Ninja. Let's import form. It gives us access to the tools that we need. So that's that in place. So let's go ahead now and say category equals category .objects .create, and then we're just going to grab everything from the form and then prepare it in a way that can then be added to our database. So return ID. Let's get the name. Let's return the category.name. There we go. Okay, so that's how we can deal with it via the request post data, if you like, or maybe multi-part form data. So let's go back into the front end. So this time it's slightly different. We're going to be presented with a set of inputs. So here, our post category form. So let's give this a go, try it out. So you can see here the request body and our encoding. And here you can see we've got some forms. So we're just simulating the front end forms. So a name, let's call this new cat, slug, new cat. Remember, it can't be an underscore. This is a slug field. And then we'll execute that. It looks like that's okay. We'll return the name. Let's go into our categories. And you can now see that we've entered a new category. So the point here is that we can grab individual items from the form if we wanted to, if there was something specifically we wanted to do here. So instead of saying form and then just grabbing all the items here, we can then go ahead and, for example, just grab the name in this case. So name is going to be a string, and then we can say equals form. And then we can also then just grab, for example, the slug. So the same thing with the slug, and then we can just grab that too. And then we can essentially just utilize that. Just bring this up. So we can then essentially then just utilize that to create data here. So here we've just grabbed from the form the name and the slug, and then we can just basically now use name and slug here to extend or to create. So for example, let's say name equals name, and then we're going to say slug equals slug. So we're going to create using these manually. We're just going to create this. So we need to define yeah, great. Okay, so with that in place, we should be able to do that. So let's just say form params. So we'll create a slightly different endpoint. We'll give us a different name. Params. There we go. So this time we use the endpoint with the params here, and you can see that we are presented with the same setup. This time I'm going to put cat params. Slug is going to be cat params, and we'll execute that. And you can see that we're going to return a very similar result if I refresh the categories, and there we go. So that's just showing you an example how you can extract the form data from the form from the front end. We can extract that data out and you can perform additional activities. Right, so with that said, let's go into the last part here. So now let's talk about the file upload. So with file upload, there's a few things to note. So I'll just take you through the whole process here, what's happened in the existing application to get to this point so that we can build this endpoint. Right, so if you're not too familiar with this, wrong way. If you're not too familiar with this, let's go ahead and first of all, just look at the inventory. So in the model here, we have a media table. This has an image field. So that's only possible because we've got Pillow installed. So basically that's just going to store the URL to the actual image. So we've got that in place as our media. Now it does have a foreign key to product. So we're going to need to deal with that. We can't just type in or send across product 1. We need to grab the actual instance of the product in this case before we can then run the query, but you'll see that in a second. So that's the setup there, image field, install Pillow, which is already installed. And then we go into settings. At the bottom here, we've defined the media URL, the path for the media folder. So you can see a folder here called media, and there's a folder here called images inside of that. So that's what we have here. So what we want to do is have the capabilities of submitting maybe a new product, adding a new product, or in this case, the example I'm going to show you is just a case of adding a adding an image to an existing product. So the example that I'm going to show you here is just adding an image to an existing product. So let's go ahead and API.post, and then we're going to create an endpoint here of upload media. Okay, so def upload media, and then request. What do we need to do here? So we got the product. Yeah, let's go for product. I'm just going to call this product ID. It's going to be an integer equals form. So I'm going to need the product ID. I need a colon there. So I'm going to grab that from the form. And then I'm going to then grab the file. So I need the file and I need to know what product to associate it to. So now then, file. So that's going to be upload id file, and that's going to equal file. So a new tool here is file. So what we're going to need to do here is import file as from Ninja. So from Ninja, we've imported file. So that's going to help us deal with that. So you can see the kind of the whole code right there. So with that in place, we're going to grab the image separately from the form data. That's important to understand. I don't think at the moment you can grab, if you have a form, you can grab everything at once. You need to grab that individually. So we can say product equals. So we're going to get the object by 404. So we're going to get it from product. So what we need to do first is find the instance of the product in the product table. Okay, so on the front end, we're going to type in the product ID, and then we're going to grab the product that's associated to that ID. And now what we can do is we can say media equals, we're going to now insert into the media table. So using create. Now we don't have media at the moment, so we're going to need to, from the models, we need to bring in media. And then in addition to that, this here is upload file. That is something that we're going to upload file. Okay, so we're not file. I've done it. Uploaded file equals file. Okay. Okay, it's come back. It's come back to me. So upload file. We're going to need to bring this in, but this is the equivalent of Django's upload file. So if you go to the documentations, just type in upload file. That's going to manage the file. From here we can, for example, we can read the data, we can have a look at, for example, the name, the size, type of content, the character set. So it just gives us access to those type of tools. So I think from the documentation, it says it's an alias to the Django upload file. So we are going to need to bring in this tool in from Ninja files. I think it is from Ninja files, import upload file. Okay, so that's the tool that we're going to need there to manage that and be able to access and interact with the file. So now we've got the media objects.create. So we're going to say product inventory. Right, so this is the foreign key. So if we go back into our inventory, into our models, into media, you can see that this foreign key is referenced, this field referenced to as product inventory. So this is the field we're referring to. So equals product. So what we've done here is we've grabbed the product instance here, and now we're just making that relation. So we're saying, okay, we want to work with that product instance. What we want to do is we want to associate a new image to it. So image URL equals file. So what's happening here is that we're grabbing the file, and then through utilizing the tools with Django Ninja and also pillow. That's basically going to upload the file and then grab the URL where it's saved, and then it's going to place that into the database, into this field. So this is just another field related to the image that's in the media model. So with that in place, we're all ready to go. So we can just return, let's just return, for example, ID, ID media dot ID. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a result or return there for the front end, and there we go. So that will allow us to upload files, hopefully. So let's just give this a go. So with the server turned on, we've got our media upload endpoint here. So let's give this a go. So you can see we've got one input and a file upload area. So product ID. So we do have product 1, but we may as well just check this. So products, may not have one. So this is product 1. There's a 1 here in the URL here. So that tells me it's product 1. So let's go back. Where are we? In here. And then we're going to upload a file. So let's upload this file right here. And then execute. And it looks like it's done. So let's go back into our code. So straight away, I can see that the image is uploaded. Excellent. So the image is definitely there. So I go back into Django admin. I can see that in medias, we have a new media object, and that's associated to product 2, which is ID 1. Okay, so that seems to be working okay. So now we know how to grab images. It's just a case of now just looping through the images and then just adding them to the database, in this scenario at least. So in our media table, we're going to have, for example, product ID 1, image X, and then there might be another instance, product ID 1, image Y, and so on. So in this case, updating multiple files, just to give you a kind of a crude example, it's just a case of creating a simple loop. Now we are going to be working with multiple images, so let's turn this into a list. So a list of images this time, and then let's go ahead now and just create a very simple loop. Okay, so for say for X, let's have a think about this. So we're going to, just one item in it. For X in, and this is going to be file. So for X in file, or it should be files now. So let's change that to files. Let's just go back. Apologies. Let's make a new endpoint for this. Media multiple. Okay, so files upload. So we're going to need a list here. First thing first. So let's make sure we change the name from upload media to upload media multiple, for example. Okay, so we've got that, and now we've got the product. So we're going to grab the product, and this time we're going to say, just create a for loop for image in files. So for each item, or each image that's been uploaded, we're basically just going to, run this. So we're just going to create a new instance in the media table with that image. So this is not file, this should be files. Okay, and then at the end here, let's just go for success true. Okay, so that's going to grab multiple images, upload them to the associated product. So I've gone ahead and just deleted the images. I just need to make sure I've got a product. I know the product ID. So this is product 3 here. It's got an ID of 3. So we're going to use that product ID 3. All right, so there's no media here. So let's go back into our API endpoint, refresh. So we've got the post multiple uploads here. So I'm just going to grab that, going to try this out. And this gives us a nice little option to add multiple items here. So this is product 3. I'm going to add some files to it. Just the same file. Just going to upload 2 of these files. And then we're going to go for execute. Oh, looks like we've got an error here. Okay, so we're denied access. So let's just take a look at the code. I wonder if it's because I've got the slash there. So let's just give that a go. So I've removed the end trailing slash there. So let's just try this again. Okay. So I've got error not found response body. So this time, okay. Okay, so this time I've looked in the terminal, it says not found. It can't find the endpoint because I've removed the trailing slash. So I'm probably just going to need to refresh this. So I've just refreshed. It's taken me back to here. So let's just try that one more time. So ID3, can add the artboard image. And then let's just give that a go. So this time we've still got an error, 500. X-frame denied. Okay, it's getting a little bit late. I can see what the problem is. So I'm not referencing image, am I? So here, for example, I'm referencing image URL and files. So I'm referencing files as the whole files. So here I need to change this, apologies, to IMG. Okay, so that every time it loops around, it's going to take one of the photos, images out, and then it's going to place it into the database. So grab all the images, iterate over them. So one at a time, image, image, then the second image, and it goes in. Okay, so that was the problem, I reckon. So let's go back here. I'm just going to resubmit, and there we go. So we've got success, true this time. Go back into here. Looks like we've uploaded 2 images, and they're associated to product 3. So that's how to upload multiple images. Of course, when I say upload multiple images, etc., I mean, I will in the future add some more tutorials for the front end. Obviously, this is all kind of back end stuff here, just learning the basics of CRUD. Hopefully that came across to you. Hopefully there was some value here. Like I said at the very beginning, you could definitely now, or if you haven't already done so, just read through the supporting documentation. I've tried to, not to belittle people, but I've tried to talk in a kind of simplistic way, not to use too much technical terms, just to get the point across, kind of the underpinning knowledge, the scaffold, if you like. So now you can go ahead potentially and read the documentation, have a look at some of the code that I use that you're not too sure about, get those answers if you are unfamiliar with some of the different type of code that you try to use here. Otherwise, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I hope to see you in another tutorial. Thank you very much.